Yat ash ke do shudina ash a Ethel brand shin shat be putwani michelin nakai bashes chi sitna jenny dashu che do nakai dashanala say zizi did not sha and kinfena ke hashten and I'm just really blessed to be here with all of you right now in this space. We're in a hogan. It just feels really comfortable. It reminds me of my grandfather's house that I spent many days in when I wasn't out herding sheep with my mom. My grandfather would watch me, and he lived in a hogan much like this. And I loved his dirt floor. So this feels really, really good to be in this space here with all of you. I have my campaign manager here. You want to say hi, son? You want to say yata? He's kind of shy sometimes, so. Well, you know, I never really thought that we would be in this place where, you know, we're ready to elect a woman leader. But over the last few years, I've had many people encourage me to consider this. You know, I had my Che Pizza approach me in the fall and really encourage me. And that made me think very seriously about it. And you know, immediately as we discussed that, my platform just kind of came to life in that conversation, because there are so many things that need to change in our community. We need really strong change. But it's not really change. It's returning to who we are as the Diné people. It's digging deep and reconnecting with who we are, with our culture, our language, our traditions, our institutions, our inherent sovereignty, our inherent sovereign authority. You know, before Hueldi, we had very strong governments. We had very strong leaders. And we were an undefeatable nation. And it was only through extreme human rights violations that our people were forced into a treaty agreement with the United States and conceded extensive resource and land losses. But in modern times, that could not have happened. That would not have happened. We would have our government and our leaders still in place. And I think that's what we need to push for. We need to return to those strong institutions, because they made us undefeatable. And they will continue to guide us and give us strength into the future for generations to come. And you know, there really is one place to be Diné, and we're here now, and we need to preserve that. We need to fight for that with everything we have. And I think now is that moment. It was really shocking in the fall. I was reviewing a report issued by the police department, and they had a section on the demographics of Navajo Nation. And in 1980, only 20% of our people lived off the Navajo Nation. But now more than half of our people live off of the Navajo Nation. And what that has meant is tremendous loss of language, loss of culture, and a disruption in the continuity of who we are as Diné people. So in order to ensure that we continue as a society, as a nation, we need to bring our people home. That's extremely, extremely important to me. You know, the structure, the government that we have in place now unfortunately, whether it's by design or not, it was designed by our colonizers, and it is achieving what the soldiers couldn't complete in the late 1800s. The government we have in place is driving our people from our homeland. It is serving the United States' national security interests and corporate interests, and it's failing to meet the basic needs of our people. And that is the purpose of true government. And the purpose of Diné government in particular is not only to serve the human needs of our people, but to ensure the continuity of our language and our culture and our institutions in perpetuity. So I want to bring us back to that. So the foundational piece of my platform is tradition and culture, and returning to that, allowing for that rebirth to happen, and everything else in my platform flows from that. The second component, which is extremely important, of course, is government reform. When I was in grad school, I stumbled across this report by the United States Civil Rights Commission, and it did an assessment. It was conducted in the early 70s. It did an assessment of how successful the Indian Self-Determination and Education Act of 1970 had been for the Navajo Nation and the Navajo people. And that report determined that that act was a failure for the Navajo people. And the title of the report was something like "The Navajo Nation, an American Colony, and an American Tragedy." And it went through all of these health and economic and social indicators, and it measured them from 1970 until the date of the report. And in many of those areas, we were actually doing worse than we were when the Self-Determination Act was passed. So I was curious. I took the 2005 Comprehensive Economic Development Survey of the Navajo Nation, and I compared those same factors against the 1970 statistics. And again, we were failing. We hadn't made progress in many of those areas, and in some areas we were doing worse. And so that really drove the question of, why is there economic paralysis on the Navajo Nation? And at the same time, that I was in law school, my first year of law school, there was a proposal to cap the wells in our area where my family lives. I grew up 10 miles south of Luke, and grew up in a really traditional environment, raising livestock, herding sheep, herding cattle, training horses. And I spent most of my time on the land, and the importance of water was really impressed upon me, because all life comes from that. And that's certainly true when you're living off of the land. And the tribal government wanted to use the water from the windmills in my area to supply the water for a coal slurry, 273-mile coal slurry from Black Mesa to Mojave Generating Station in Laughlin, Nevada. And as part of that proposal, they didn't seek permission of the families that would impact. And my family lives half a mile from our windmill. And it was just shocking to see that happen and to see the lack of consultation by our own government, and the turning over of our resources so willingly and easily to outside extractive interests. And the home I grew up in doesn't have electricity, and it probably won't ever have a power line to it because it's so remote, and the terrain is so rugged. One second. My campaign manager needs to take a little break. It's okay, sweetheart. And I actually almost dropped out of law school because of that, because I wanted to be home helping my family fight to protect our water and our homeland, our home. But my mother wouldn't let me. And so I did what I could from law school to help with that situation. And part of the plan contemplated relocating the families that lived in the area. And I just couldn't believe that our government would show such callous disregard for the humanity of our people again, because they, this was a repeat of what happened on Black Mesa, and that seemed like it was a result of the times, maybe, or the control of our government by outside interests. But to see that happening again in 2005 was shocking. And that really drove that concern about economics, because one of the key arguments in favor of this proposal was jobs and income, right? That so many of our people have jobs or did have jobs that were tied to the mines on Black Mesa and were reliant on that for their income. So, my question was, how do we replace those jobs? How do we create sustainable jobs and clean jobs? And so, thinking through that and just seeing when I would return home, all of the incredible innovation and entrepreneurship of our people, the creativity. Navajos are doing business anywhere and everywhere. The side of the road, flea markets are such a rich aspect of our society. So it's like we have a lot of potential and a lot of creativity and action by our people. How do we invest in that? Jobs that will be there for generations, rather than extractive-based jobs that are only going to be there as long as the resource is there or as long as the market is available. So, I had all of these questions in grad school, and so economics was key among those questions. So when I was thinking about what's my capstone paper going to be for my joint law and policy program, I was really focused on that economic development and seeing that report from the U.S. Civil Rights Commission and the lack of progress, economic progress, that has occurred in our community. I really tried to drill into that and tried to understand that. And what it came down to, there's some literature out of the Harvard Project on American Indian Economic Development. And there are some essential components, and one of those is cultural match with the government. And that really resonated with me because, our government in Window Rock right now doesn't match our culture. It wasn't designed to meet our needs. And so it is failing to meet our needs. And it has failed to meet our needs for a century now. And while the rest of the world around us has modernized and innovated, Window Rock has stayed stuck in time, essentially, and is in extreme need of modernization, and is in extreme need of creating an avenue to allow the resources that flow to Window Rock to flow to our people at the grassroots level. And so that's what I'm interested in. How do we create that cultural match? And I looked at, when I was thinking about, well, what's a good government that would prevent what happened when I was in my first year of law school, where
there's no accountability where the central government can make decisions without consulting with the people that those decisions impact. How can we have that direct accountability from the grassroots to the government, or vice versa? And so I looked at all these different models of governance, thinking like maybe there's some model participatory democracy system that could work in our community and prevent this disconnect from happening and create that cultural match. And I looked and I looked and I studied, and really, and then I was asking myself, what were our traditional governance models? And so I looked back to that and studied that. And it was so clear that those were the answer. Those had the checks and balances in its inherent design that our people need and that our people are receptive to. And so I proposed a reformed form of government that draws upon our traditional governance principles and institutions. And I think it's time now to have that conversation as a nation, not just some people in Window Rock sitting together in a room and coming up with a plan and then trying to implement it. I think there needs to be that direct engagement from the people. And so, in my first year of office, I want to have that conversation with our Navajo people, and go to every chapter and talk to people and understand, what do you want to see from your government? What role do you want your government playing? And to talk through, what are the failures of our current government? What is working? What is not working? One of the things that I saw when I was Attorney General is overgovernance. Our government is involved in every aspect of our lives as Diné people. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be more simplified. And the government should be involved in our lives when we need help from our government, not when we're trying to do things at home, in our local communities. It should not be getting in our way, but instead, with all of these laws and regulations and overgovernance, it's tying our hands as individual Diné people and as local communities. So, a key aspect of government reform under my leadership will be to eliminate those unnecessary acts of governance, those unnecessary laws and regulations, and to free our people so that we have the ability to act and solve our own problems. Because that's what's happening, right? That's where that entrepreneurial spirit comes from. That's Diné. And we need to promote and inspire more of that. And that's what we saw during the pandemic, was that reawakening of our power as Diné people. And people stepping forward, local leaders saying, I'm going to do something. I'm going to protect my community. And we saw the failure of government to respond. And we're continuing to see that failure. Our council and our president have had $2.1 billion in ARPA funds for almost an entire year, and they weren't able to spend any of it until January. And that's totally unacceptable, because we had an incredible surge of COVID in our community in January. Our people needed help, immediate help, and proactive action by the government. And so I want us to move towards a government that is more capable of actually serving the needs of our people in real time. So government reform is extremely important to me. That's the second aspect of my platform. And it's not just sort of that large-scale reform of central government and how it operates, But it's also talking about immediate change that can happen in Window Rock as soon as, I come into the president's position. There are things that can be done immediately to eliminate red tape and to make our government operate more efficiently, lower cost, and ensure that more resources are making their way back to the people. So, and this is foundational to economic development. Economic development cannot happen in our community without a strong government that has cultural match, a government that our people accept as our government. We've been operating under a temporary government structure since the 80s, and it's time that we have that permanent structure, and a structure that is responsive to the needs of the Diné people. And then the third component of my platform is law reform, and really starting with land reform. We've done so much to mimic the United States government, 3-branch government, 26 titles in our code, and we've copied and pasted federal statutes and regulations, adopted them as our own, such as in the case of our land laws, our land regulations. And we've done the same thing with state laws. And that has been done without thinking about what do our Diné people know and believe to be true in their hearts? What is the reality of our Diné people right now? And what is the future that we want for our Diné people? That was not thought about in the acceptance and approval of these laws. And that has created a significant problem in the functioning of government, because government employees are being asked to do things that they don't have adequate funding to do. They're being asked to do things that they don't have adequate staffing to do. And I think we see this most clearly in the operation of our criminal justice system and in the operation of the Navajo Nation Police Department. But going back to land and why start with land law reform. We have the largest nation within the United States. We have the largest territory. Yet, when you compare our economics, even to other Indian nations, we have some of the poorest conditions in our community. We need to recognize the authority, the rights of our people in the land. We need to recognize the wealth that our people have in the land. Nobody I know believes in their heart that their only right to the land is 1 acre as a home site. Nobody believes that. And nobody acts that way either. We all know what our land is. We know the borders. We graze our livestock on those borders. And in fact, we almost have this incentive. We're almost required to continue raising livestock to maintain the borders of our territory, and to make sure that our neighbors aren't encroaching on our land, right? Everyone in our community knows what their borders are, and they respect those and maintain them actively. So why not recognize that truth, that reality that our Diné people live? Why not write our laws so they reflect that? Because what that would do is that allows for wealth creation in our community. Not even creation, it's just recognizing that inherent wealth that our people already have and have had for generations. And that allows that reorients the power dynamics between the federal government and our people and Window Rock and our people. Because then the power is in the people, the wealth is in the people. And honestly, if you want to have a wealthy nation, a wealthy government, you have to have wealthy people. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So let's recognize that this land is not the federal government's land. It's not the Navajo Nation government's land. This land belongs to our people, to our families, to our clans. And let's recognize that. Let's write that into our laws. Let's register, those claims and allow our people the freedom to do what they want with those rights. And for some people, they're going to say, I want to give this home site. In fact, our people are already doing this, giving traditional home sites. Our people had more than one home and more than one home site. Those homes are still standing. I have family that are living in homes like that, where there's not a home site lease, but there is a home and there is descendancy. That home belonged to someone in their family and they inherited that. But our laws in Window Rock don't recognize that. So let's give Grandma the freedom to pass on her land and home sites to the people she wishes to do so in her family. That is really, really important to continuing our tradition and our culture and our way of life, to pass that on to the next generation and to not have to wait until people pass away in our community to let that happen. That also gives the opportunity for Grandma to say, my grandson has an accounting degree and wants to move home and work for the chapter government, but he doesn't have anywhere to live and he has a family. And he wants his own home. His family wants their own home. That allows Grandma to go ahead and assign part of her holdings to that family member. And that creates a home site and an opportunity. That creates protected expectations for grandson to say, I'm going to invest all of what I would invest in a down payment on a home in Phoenix and building or weatherizing, refurbishing a home on Diné Nation, right? Because that individual knows that my investment is going to be protected, and I can later sell this to another tribal member if I want to, or pass this on to my children. And I don't have to worry about the government coming in and saying, you have to move because this is tribal government land, and you don't have a right to this land. So that's one important aspect of land law reform. And another important aspect is, again, our government's failure to be able to respond to the needs of our people. So Grandma can say, I need a well. My mom doesn't have running water. Our windmill that was half a mile away was contaminated when they were doing the test drilling. Now it's poisoned by uranium. And so she has to drive 8 miles one way on a dirt road to get to the closest functioning windmill, which is no longer functioning right now. And so she actually has to drive like 20 miles to find a water source, and she has livestock. So having to drive to maintain the water supply for her livestock is almost a full-time job. And it requires a lot of wear and tear on her vehicle, and many of our elders experience that. And so for her to have the ability to say, I'm going to sell some of my claims along the highway where I don't want to herd my animals anyway, and then use that money to invest in drilling a well, that empowers her to solve her own problems, something that the government may never actually get to. and shouldn't have to get to. We should allow our people to make their own decisions in solving their problems and in how to solve their problems. For example, grandma can say, I don't want to become a lifelong consumer to Navajo Tribal Utility Authority for electricity. I want to maintain my independence, my autonomy, and I want to remain off the grid. And a lot of our people, want to live like that. And so by selling some of her land claims, she can take that money and invest in the type of electricity she wants to have, or can refurbish her home, or expand her home because now she has grandchildren living with her. It just empowers the landowners to be able to solve their own problems in the way that they want them solved. And I think that's really, really important, to respect our people and respect their desires and how they want to live their lives. And so land reform, I think, is foundational to that. And that also gives us two opportunities. One is it allows our people access to wealth. Many people, when they start a small business, they're drawing on intergenerational wealth, or they're taking a mortgage out on their home, borrowing against their wealth. We don't have that in our community because that's been denied us. These laws and regulations have been telling us that what we know and believe to be true in our heart in terms of our rights to our land and our wealth in the land is not true. So we need to change that. We have a government in Window Rock that has the authority to create law, and that law should reflect the reality that our people live and the vision that we have for our future. And my vision for the future of our people is a future of wealth and opportunity and agency by the people to solve their own problems and take actions and set the course for their own destiny. And government should get out of the way and allow that to happen. And laws should be repealed or revised to allow that to happen and to actually reflect what our people need those laws to reflect. So that's the third part of my platform. The fourth part is really focused on healing. When I was Attorney General, my chief prosecutor resigned within a month of me taking that office. And the prosecutor's office was in shambles. We only had 7 prosecutors for the entire Navajo Nation. And there are 10 judicial districts. And so we didn't even have enough prosecutors to cover each court system. It was a really, really tough situation. And so, but it was a blessing because it required my focus on that issue of public safety in our community. And I had to take some bold measures to ensure that my team was able to do their job and that justice would actually be delivered to our people. And that was my driving inspiration, was wanting to know that when somebody calls the police on Navajo Nation, there's a timely police response, and there's a timely prosecution, and there's a timely disposition in the courts. That way, our government is actually serving our people in that respect. And that wasn't happening because there weren't enough people. And there still aren't enough people. We had rebuilt that office. And under the new administration, many people have left. The chief prosecutor is gone. And so that is not in a good state. However, in the process of rebuilding that office and bringing in the Chief Justice and just all of the people who needed to be in the same room to talk about how do we make the system function. None of us have enough staff, none of us have enough funding, but our people need us to respond
we need to restore the faith of our people in our government. That was my goal with respect to public safety. And so I brought these leaders together and I said, how can we do this? How can we do this? We were meeting regularly, and this grew into a public safety summit. We brought all of our staff together, and it was amazing because those people had never been in the same room together. Everybody was kind of siloed off. Nobody was talking to anybody else. Nobody liked anybody else because they'd never met the other person. Even people within the same office, my prosecutors even, had never really met each other. And so it was just this incredible humanizing experience to bring all those people together. And we had everyone share the challenge, like share what are your resources? What are your limitations? How many vacancies do you have? How much funding, what's your funding shortage for what you need to be able to do? And it was really eye-opening for everyone to see how everyone was struggling with high vacancies and underfunding. So, you know, what we learned in that discussion, and I had some incredible folks challenging me to think more broadly, you know, more holistically about solving these challenges in our community. And so, you know, we ended up bringing in Department of Behavioral Health Services, Department of Social Services, because those people are also really important to public safety response and problem solving and healing for these families. And our community across the board has experienced incredible trauma. Many of our people are descendants of prisoners of war, and there is trauma associated with that. And there's a lot of violent crime in our community, suicide, substance misuse. All of these things are interrelated, right? You can see that the substance misuse leads to violent crime. The violent crime is just part of what's happening in our community. The incident of sexual assault in our community is so extreme that every single day there is a call reporting sexual assault in our community. President Nez just reported on this a couple weeks ago when in the Navajo Times. Based on statistics, that's the rate of sexual assault in our community, and that's totally unacceptable. And so, but you know, that when that happens, suicide can come from that, right? So all of these things are interrelated. The overcrowded housing is tied to that. That's another reason why housing is so important, so that you're not having multiple generations of people in one home if they don't want to live in one home together. So, you know, but how do we solve these problems? Again, who are we as Diné people? What are the institutions that we have? We have peacemaking, and we get national recognition for having a peacemaking system, but nobody uses it. No lawyers are seeking to use the peacemaking system. It usually only gets used during the sentencing phase, but that's not what peacemaking is designed for. Peacemaking is designed to be the initial problem-solving forum for any disputes that happen in our community. And that's what it should be used for. When there's a dispute in our community, it should always, when there's a crime in our community, everything should go to peacemaking first. That is exerting our inherent authority as Diné people, as a Diné sovereign. And then from there, if the problem can't be resolved there, if an injury is too extreme, it can't be addressed in that forum, then that should be moved into a more Western style system. But even so, even in those extreme cases, there are still, you know, we need more than just our police responding when there's an incident in our community. We need social services responding, behavioral health. We need to surround that family in crisis with all of the tools and resources they need to address the harm and to heal
collectively and work through the challenge. I think part of the problem with violent crime in our community and the high incident of domestic violence is, our people, for so long, we've gone through the boarding school systems. We were told to speak only when spoken to, and we've forgotten how to communicate with each other and have constructive conversations and use language as a tool to solve problems. And so we need to relearn that. And I think the peacemaking system is a way to do that, to reteach us these tools that we can use to solve problems at home and in our communities. So that healing aspect, again, law reform essentially, and drawing upon our inherent institutions. I think that is very important. That's the fourth component of my platform. And of course, making sure that we have the resources for those wraparound services, the staff, the counselors, the detox facility, all of the pieces that we need for that healing system to work need to be in place. And then the fifth aspect of my platform is really, looking at Title I, right, that draws upon Diné fundamental law. And that includes a fourth branch of government, a national security branch of government. We need that. We need an entity within our government that can respond to crises, whether that's the pandemic. We're not done with this pandemic. We don't know when it's going to end, if it will ever end. And so we need an entity that can respond quickly and effectively. We also are, we're inside right now. We were driven inside by the wind today, and it's, excessive wind. We're experiencing wildfires right now, very early in the season. We are on a path of climate change that is going to just become much more intense in the next 10 years. And we are in a moment where we have to reverse course in order to protect the continuation of human life, really, and all life on this planet. So, having a government that can respond when we have climate-related crises in our community is really, really important to protecting human and animal life in our communities. And we don't have that right now. And additionally, with this fourth branch of government, which I envision to be insulated from the politics of window wrap, that is a place where other entities need to be housed, like the Office of Ethics and Rules. That should not be under the legislative branch. It should not, decisions on funding that office should not be made by the people that office is supposed to be monitoring and potentially enforcing against. And then there are other entities in our government that also need that insulation, like the Office of Attorney General, and now we're seeing potentially the Office of the Controller as well. So in the Office of the Auditor General, what are the entities in our government that we want to protect from politics? I think those are the things we put in that fourth branch of government. And then the sixth aspect, of course, is language and culture. And I hear delegates and presidents talking about the importance of language and culture in our community, but I don't see them doing anything about it. I don't see them spending money on it. I don't see them pursuing an initiative to ensure that language is being transmitted to the next generation and that our culture is being passed down. So I want to actually invest in that. I want to require that any school that operates on our nation has 1 hour of instruction a day dedicated to language and culture transmission, so that our kids aren't just learning language in 1st through 3rd grade, but they're learning language kindergarten through 12th grade, and they're achieving a high level of fluency when they exit from our school systems. And people will ask, well, what's the source of funding? There's impact aid money available for public schools. It can be used for something like this. The BIA schools, BIA funded schools already have a lot of language and culture instruction. We just need to make sure that they're meeting our standards and delivering that. And then, we have things like the CHISN fund that can be tapped into to continue our people and our language and our culture into the future. So, and we need to be thinking innovatively, like creating actual language and culture institutes where we're collecting knowledge and transferring that knowledge, and we're continuing to strengthen our language and maintain our language as a living language. And those institutes could be a point of transmission as well for renaturalization of our people. When they come home, they can go to this intensive language and culture immersion program and then come back into our community and have that minimum level of fluency. And Navajo Nation employees should all have to go through that program as well. And then more of our government can happen in our language. And more of our employees will have the cultural competency that they need to successfully deliver services to our people. And there are other things that need to happen. Let's invest in our language and culture bearers. Let's invest in fellowships that will allow them to meet their human needs and focus just on continuing the transmission of our language to the next generation and passing on our culture to the next generation. And let's develop funded apprenticeship programs so someone can make that their job to just learn our language and our culture. And then they can move into that fellowship program. And then that's their lifelong career, is to just be our national treasures. I think this investment is critical to ensuring that we can stop the language and culture loss that's happening in our community. And so that gets me through the 6 components of my platform. And I haven't shared, I've shared some things about who I am and my background in the course of this. But I'm from here. I was born in Tuba City, raised here. At my family's ranch, and actually just behind us is a draw. We used to bring our cattle down to the loop auction yards. We drive our cattle down here, and we'd use those draws to keep our cattle together. And I have very fond memories of doing that as a family. And then also, as our herd dwindled, and as people went into wage-type jobs. At a certain point, it was just me and my little sister who were doing the cattle drive. I think we were in 3rd or 4th grade. My sister is 3 years younger than me, so she's very much younger. We just had these incredible experiences and this beautiful, strong connection with the land and with our livestock. I remember one time we were riding the horses home after driving them down to the cattle down to the auction yard, and my little sister became very tired, and so I'm the older sister, so I have to try to be more responsible and strong, for her. And so I had her fall asleep on her horse, laying on her stomach. And then I was starting to fall asleep in my saddle as well. And so I did the same thing. She was like, well, our horses know where we live. And they took us back to our windmill. So we ended up half a mile from our home. And then we woke up and then we rode our horses the rest of the way home. And, that's just such a beautiful memory that I have, and that being here reminds me of that. But I have this history of working in really tough conditions, growing up here, working with livestock, a lot of times I was the only person out with the sheep or out with the cattle or hunting for some missing cattle. And so I learned independence and strength and the ability to problem solve quickly and to be brave because I didn't have a choice. And I refined that over time. And my mother has challenged me. She's pushed me to follow my dreams and to really reach as far as I can. And that's how I ended up at Harvard, so far away from home, but I was very curious. And also, I applied not really thinking I was gonna get in, of course, because I don't think we ever had anyone from our high school, Winslow High School, go to Harvard. And so it just wasn't really something that that people in my community did, and certainly not coming from a little ranch 10 miles south of Loop. But I got in and it was like, okay, well, I can't not go. I can't regret this for the rest of my life. And always talk about how I got accepted to Harvard once, but didn't go. And so I had to dig deep and be brave and go as far away from home as I'd ever been. I think I'd been on a plane maybe 2 or 3 times prior to leaving for college. And I experienced extreme isolation and culture shock. I couldn't talk to my parents. I had to write letters to them. And it was really hard, but I knew that I had to do it. I had to succeed because honestly, I didn't know how to quit. I don't know how to quit because that's not something that was ingrained in me. And I had to draw on my strength and remember the strength I had at home growing up and remind myself I can do hard things and I am brave and capable. And I have to set that example for the future generations and let them see that our people can do these things. Our people can be successful. And because that's what I saw in my family as well. My aunts and uncles going to college and succeeding in those environments. And my mom talking about my uncles going into the military and being at the top of their class and solving these challenges that other recruits couldn't because they had grown up in our environment and they were tough. They were the toughest of those recruits and they outperformed everyone. And so that to me is what being Diné is having excellence and performing at a high level. And that's what I see in our people. And that is what we showed our government and the world that we were capable of when we responded to this pandemic. There were so many leaders at the grassroots level who stepped forward and took that stand and defended our communities, protected our communities, and they did it in a high level of excellence. They made sure that resources got to our people quickly and the right resources got to our people and it got to our people in the furthest, remotest areas. They just showed so much ingenuity and creativity and tenacity and strength and that is what our people are about. And that, I want to remind our young people that is who you are. You are the descendants of the strongest of our people. You are the descendants of warriors and survivors of war. You are the descendants of prisoners of war, people who had the mental and the physical strength to endure extreme human rights violations. And so don't forget that. And let's not forget that as a nation. And let's reassert that strength and that power that lies within us as the Diné people. And let's not, thank Washington, D.C. for $2.1 billion and run away and fight over those remains, those spare resources. Let's dig deep and let's draw on our strength and remind this president that all of the wealth that this country has comes from indigenous peoples, and let them know that it's unacceptable that our people are living in developing world conditions, and we need them to invest in Indian country, and let them know it's not about build back better in our homeland. It's about doing the initial build, and it's about doing evaluation of the wealth that we lost and getting compensation for that. And it's about reparations, and it's about closing the equity gaps that exist in our community. We send a quarter of our people to defend this country. That's higher than any other group in this country, because our people love this land, because this land is our land. And we need to make sure that when those veterans come home, they come home to developed world conditions. They come home to better conditions than what other Americans are living in, because they are the ones defending this country and ensuring that democracy continues to prevail in the world. So I think we need a leader that will articulate those things to Washington, D.C. and remind them what our place is, what our rightful place as Indigenous peoples and as Diné people is in this country, and remind them of their obligation and their debt to us as such, and ensure equity for our people and prosperity for our people in that process. So that is something that I want to do as your leader, and I know I can do it. And I think it is essential to transforming our community. All of these things are essential to transforming our community, because our children deserve this. Our elders deserve this. All of our community members deserve this. So I hope you will join in this effort and help bring this vision to life, and ensure that we remain a Diné nation, because the challenges we face right now are resulting in excessive depopulation of our community. And without people, there is no nation. We need to bring our people home. We need to ensure that our people have access to wealth, and that there is hope and opportunity in our communities, that our children can see a vision, a brighter vision, a future for themselves, a hopeful future for themselves in our community. And so I thank you all for taking time to be here and for your support. And I look forward to meeting more of you and talking to you more about the issues that matter to you, and fleshing out the aspects of my platform with you. But now is the time. We cannot wait. We already have more than half of our people living off of our nation. We need to reverse this. We have experienced tremendous language and culture loss as a result of that depopulation. And now we have lost, 2/3 of the people that we have lost in the pandemic are our elders, our language and culture bearers. We need to take aggressive, proactive measures to ensure that we are rebuilding the language and culture competency in our community and passing that on to our young people. So yeah, everyone, thank you again for being here, for your interest and support. If anyone wants to say anything to add to the conversation, you're welcome to do that. Hand over the mic.
Ethel, I don't think you formally announced that you're running for Navajo Nation president.
So join me in this join me in bringing this vision to life. Again, my name is Ethel Billy Branch, and I am running for Navajo Nation president. So please join me in this effort, because this is not about me. This is about you, and this is about our children and our future as Diné people. So join me in reclaiming our government for our people, and join me in ensuring that this one place to be Navajo remains Diné.